In this segment, we're going to be focusing on how to build and grow a personal brand. But before we can begin to build or even grow a personal brand, we've got to ask ourselves the question, what is a personal brand? A personal brand is how you choose to live your values and how the world consumes those values and in turn shape an opinion about who the world thinks you are. Now, I know that this sounds like a mouthful, but I'm going to break it down. Let's just think about values for a second. What are values? Well, some examples would include being trustworthy, being conservative, being creative, justice, friendship, and the list goes on. These are the things that are the bedrock of our moral compass. Now, when I say moral compass, it means that whenever we're in doubt, our values are what kicks in and allows us to make a decision that then informs our action. It's really the hard wiring deep down in your heart and your soul that sits at the pit of your stomach. It's essentially who you are. This doesn't mean, though, that values are cemented and cannot be changed at all. They can be aspirational. So, for example, if you value trustworthiness, but you know that your behavior hasn't been as trustworthy as you'd like it to be, this is an aspirational value, and this means that this is something that you can work towards. What is important is for you to understand what are your own values. And the only way you can do that is by firstly asking yourself, what are my non-negotiables? Is it family? Is it friendship? Is it honesty? What are the things that are non-negotiable to you? And then you ask yourself, well, if these are the things that are non-negotiable, how am I actually living these values? And if we have a really honest conversations with ourselves, we will then be able to see that we have values that we are currently living, and we have values that are aspirational. Values that we are currently living are things that really just come naturally to us. And aspirational values are the things that you aspire to be perceived about you. So again, being an honest person, a creative person, a trustworthy person. Now, although values are more or less solid, how we choose those values will change over time. So a good point for you in this part of the webinar is to take a moment to reflect on what are my values and how am I living my values? And is there a gap between the values that I have and the values that I aspire to have? And of course, the final question you need to ask yourself is, how am I then going to live my aspirational values? What do I need to do now to become more honest, to become more trustworthy, to become more creative, as an example? Now that we understand what a personal brand is, we have to ask ourselves, well, why should I have it? Why is it important to have a personal brand at all? Now, remember that we started off this webinar talking about the fact that values and your personal brand allows the world to consume you. This means irrespective of whether we like it or not, people around us are constantly forming opinions about us and they're forming thoughts about us. And this does matter because we don't live in silos. We live in communities and ecosystems that include other people. Take, for example, if you want to go and get a job, you are relying on another person in that moment who's forming an opinion and a view about you to give you an opportunity. So how you present yourself then really actually matters in that context. But even in a social context, think about getting married. Before somebody marries you and they might not know you as well as they would like, they most likely look at the brand and the person that you are presenting yourself as, and they make a call on whether you are going to be a suitable partner or not. So what is important is that you don't become lost in the crowd. You don't become a no-name brand, a person that is indistinguishable, a person that cannot stand out in a crowd. Because this means that you really haven't thought about your values and you haven't thought about how your personal brand then shows up in the different spaces within which you exist. How does your personal brand show up at work? How does your personal brand show up in your family? How does your personal brand show up in the community? And the only way that we can ensure that we don't become indistinguishable and no-name brands is if we work on our values and we translate our values into our personal brand. Let's use another quick example. If you are a person that says that you value community and you value helpfulness, this means that in your family, in your workplace, in your community, you're always going to be known as the helpful person. And this means that your behaviors and your actions and how you engage with people must make it simple and easy for people to think about you and think of helpfulness as a way of describing you. Now that we know what a personal brand is and why it's important to have a personal brand, let's think about how do we then grow our personal brand. Now, the first thing that we're likely to think about when we think about growing a personal brand is all the social media platforms that exist. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, and that's okay. But do not make the mistake of thinking that a personal brand only exists on social media platforms. Remember that a personal brand is a reflection of your values. And so it's your everyday behavior, your everyday actions, and your everyday decisions that are actually a reflection of your personal brand. Social media platforms just allow us an extended platform where we can share that brand. Now that we've gone to social media platforms, let's talk a little bit about what your personal brand should look like on those platforms. The first thing that I want you to consider is that your social media profile and your brand should not be different from your personal brand. Think about how employers today go about their recruiting practices. 99% of the time, they actually start on your social media profile to ensure that the personal brand that they're consuming there is consistent with the person that they actually want to bring into the organization. So it's important that who you are is actually reflected on your personal brand. There's often a confusion about making a distinction between a life that is public and life that is private. Unfortunately, in 2017, what is private is actually very, very small, because even if you don't put up something on social media, a friend could put up a picture with you on social media, and that really blurs the lines between what is private and what is public. To be safe, ensure that everything that is on social media is something that reflects your personal brand and that you're comfortable with the world consuming, irrespective of who the audience is. Now, remember that if you have multiple social media profiles, that you need to make sure that these profiles are all consistent. The same person on Facebook should be the same person on Twitter and should be the same person on Snapchat. When you begin to present different versions of yourself, you lose credibility, you decrease the perception of you being a trustworthy person. And so your tweets and your posts and your videos should all be reflective of the same person. Also remember, this also goes to the kind of pictures that you want to use on social media. What are those images saying about the kind of person that you are? If you want to go into an industry which is very conservative, that is very serious, but your profile picture on Facebook is with you holding 2 jugs of beer, that's really not going to fly with a potential employer. You really want them to see this person that is of integrity and that is going to add value to your company. This doesn't mean that you should not be yourself. Be yourself, but be mindful of the self that you are giving to the world and that the world is consuming of you. Most importantly, make sure that you stand out, that you are present, and that there's a very clear vision of what you represent. In essence, make sure that your personal brand can be consumed positively and in a manner that works for you.